It's a whole different perspective from up here.
Let me give you a little more height there.
My name is John Hogle, and I am Bob's cousin, 1 year older. As has been previously mentioned, this building holds a significant place in Bob's life. Reiko has played here for, 20 years? Or more than 20 years on that beautiful organ upstairs. Nisa and Martine were married on this very stage or altar. So this is a wonderful place in their family history. I know, as everybody has mentioned prior, that Bob had a wide variety of talents and interests, most of which were available for everybody to see, but not all of them. I'd like to sort of paint a picture of the man that I knew. Both of our families grew up in Southern California. We were close enough that we got together as families on a regular basis, the normal holidays, birthdays, and so on. But we were always in Bob's house, never in our house. And that was his dad. His dad wanted to be a host and not a guest. And his dad sort of ruled the environment, shall we say, when people were there. His father was a very successful, quintessential entrepreneur. He'd start a company, grow it, sell it, and start all over again. This allowed his mother, who had tremendous style and appreciation of the arts, to redecorate their home. They'd buy a house, she'd redecorate it, and then sell it, and then buy another one. These weren't rundown places. These were West LA, Pacific Palisades, and if you know the area, it's quite wealthy. But that was the way it went. And this was Bob's foundation in life. He was surrounded by success of his father. He was independent. He appreciated the arts, and he developed a real estate at this very young age. He developed an interest in real estate at this very young age. The families, we drifted apart. Father's careers took different directions into different parts of the world. We reconnected, Bob and I, at Berkeley in the 60s. And it was mentioned here that when he wore his ROTC uniform on campus, I was never privy to this, but I imagined his conversations and his debates were cataclysmic, shall we say. This was a time when the National Guard was on campus, helicopters were gassing Sproul Plaza, but Bob endured that. He was studying, as mentioned earlier, a variety of subjects, especially Russian history, literature, and then philosophy. 4 of us, Bob, 2 of his fraternity brothers, and myself, lived for our senior year in a flat on College Avenue. And this is where I really began to appreciate Bob's intellect. He never studied, never. And he hadn't done a lick of work until the night before some major paper was due. He'd sit down, and in 3 hours would dash off 20 pages and get an A. It drove me crazy, because I'm a grunt. I have to sit down and study all the time. The one thing that stood out in that episode, that period of time for me, was the four of us decided that in this flat, we needed a rooftop deck. Now, you're talking about 20-year-olds who are majoring in communication, music, poli-sci, and Russian history. What do we know about construction? But we figured a couple of 2x4s and some plywood, we could build a deck on the roof. And sure enough, we did. I'm sure the landlord really appreciated the nail holes in his roof. But Bob said, and this is typical, it improved the value of the property and made it infinitely more rentable. And there again, real estate comes into play. We drifted apart again as Bob went to law school down in LA. After law school, as was mentioned previously, the Army thought they could use Bob back in the DC area. After a while, Bob had other ideas, but I suspect that the Army did him the greatest favor of his life. Because on one day, he was in Baltimore, and he went to the Peabody School of Music. He followed the sounds of a grand organ drifting through the hallways. He peeked in one of the practice rooms, and there he saw a diminutive young woman playing with her long hair swishing back and forth as she played on the double rank. Bob was mesmerized. He went back again and again and again. He said it was just the music. I think it was a lot more than just the music. They returned, Bob and Reiko, to the Bay Area, moved into a house in Rockridge in Oakland. I lived there with them for a year as Bob started his law career as a sole practitioner. It was a rocky beginning for him. As was mentioned, he relied solely on referrals and personal contacts. But that over time, that client list developed into a solid practice that specialized in real estate law. The other thing I learned during this time was that Reiko is a fabulous cook. And she makes absolutely the best Mexican food in the world. The two of them, of course, started their family, and they have three most delightful and most accomplished daughters. I know that Bob must have been filled with pride as he listened to the Lane family quartet when they were younger. We drifted again when I moved to Seattle. We stayed in touch and would visit whenever I came down to the Bay Area. You notice he never went up there, but I came down. It was years before Bob invited me to visit his home and his office in Point Richmond. It was an overwhelming experience. Bob's appreciation of the fine arts had exploded into an extensive collection of Oriental, primarily Japanese, bronzes, woodblock prints, augmented by paintings that had hung in his childhood homes, photography, carpets, and books everywhere. I suppose that I contributed a little bit to this chaos. We both acted as art pickers for each other, sending each other items that we thought the other would enjoy. Big, small, didn't matter. Just the week before Bob's passing, I sent him a stamp, one simple stamp from Liechtenstein that depicted one of his earliest lithographs that he ever purchased. I thought he'd get a kick out of it, that his taste was now being validated by a country. I hope that the post office managed to deliver it in time. His office and his home may have looked like chaos, but I am sure that Bob knew exactly where every case file was. And if he didn't, he had somebody at his side who had been with him for many, many years, and I am sure that she did. As many of you know, it's always those in the quote-unquote back room that keep an organization running smoothly. I've tried to give you a complete picture of Bob, but I know I haven't been successful. He was a successful attorney who had a wonderful way with words, a family man, a collector of fine things, a musician, coming from his father. But like was mentioned, he played one tune. It was a ragtime, boogie-woogie kind of thing, which is what his father had played. And he was had a boisterous joie de vivre that you couldn't forget. He'll be profoundly missed by his immediate and extended family and his colleagues in the legal profession. I know that he hoped to leave the legal profession in a better place than when he started his practice. It is a hope that we all have, that each of us makes the world a little better, that we have made a difference, no matter how infinitely small. Rest in peace, Bob, knowing that you have made all of our lives a little bit better. I have also been asked to read two other messages, one from his brother, Christopher, who is in Dallas and unable to be with us today, and the other from my sister, Bob's remaining cousin, who lives in Kentucky. God knows why, but also cannot be with us. First, from his brother, Christopher. Growing up in the Lane household was not the simple task you might have thought it was. Like any task in the 50s and any household in the 50s and 60s, there were rules and chores. But this was the Lane household, and quote unquote, we do not follow other households. We are not the Smith family, nor the Joneses, was the mantra. We are the Lane household. Chris was 5 years younger than Bob. I was still in my single-digit years when Bob became a teenager, and remember vividly listening to the glorious sounds of the car radio. The Everly Brothers, Elvis, Little Richard. These were sounds that no other 8-year-old would be privy to, unless he had an older brother who opened the door to another world waiting to be discovered. Bob's first car with a radio was a Chevy Nova. He also would occasionally borrow his mother's Chrysler station wagon to drive to school at the Harvard School. This station wagon had a monster engine in it, and it was a flying tank. As if you remember the cars of the 50s and 60s, they were built like tanks. Bob, one fateful day, was driving the Chrysler to school in the rain. Wow, the discussions that followed all centered on one thing, maybe two. The first was Bob. The second was how much it was going to cost to pay for the Beverly Hills light post. I didn't realize how much light posts cost 60 years ago. Certainly the ones in Beverly Hills must have been gold-plated. I'd be remiss also if I didn't mention the escape from reality called Malibu Lake. In 1956, it snowed at the lower elevations around Los Angeles, and Mom decided to take us to see the snow. We drove well north of LA, probably on Mulholland Drive, where we got lost. There was no GPS in those days. Taking one of the roads off of Mulholland, we discovered a lake out in the middle of nowhere. We finally found our way home, and Mom talked about the lake so much that the next weekend, the whole family drove to the lake and spoke with the lake manager. Mom and Dad looked at many houses, and then eventually were told that there was one last house, but it was so run down, you wouldn't be interested in it. Well, I think they bought it on the spot. It was run down, but it was the best piece of property on the entire lake. The old saw, location, location, location. Starting growing up, spending their summers at the lake, Bob developed a close-knit group of friends.
So I just want to say that we didn't know this was taking too long, so we may have to share some of these stories later.
Oh, okay. We're going to wrap it up quick. Anyway, there was an incident with the toilet and a cherry bomb, which you've all heard stories about, I'm sure, in your days. One last thing from Chris is that 2 days after Bob passed, he woke up about 2 in the morning with a song beating through his head. It was a song from the late 60s, 1970s. He hadn't thought about it in years, and it had a stellar group of musicians playing the song, and the song was entitled, "That's the Way God Planned It." And it was special to Chris because Bob had given him that album back in 1970 to Chris for Christmas. Bob will be terribly missed by many, with a huge hole created in my life that will never be filled, reminiscing, advice, debating past and current political debacles, real and imagined, and how to fix everything that's wrong. I have another long letter from my sister.
I think we can invite people to
And
share
I
it
think,
later.
yes.
I'll make copies for people.
Okay, thank you. I'm getting hoarse anyway. Thank you.